Good morning and good afternoon. Welcome to another episode of Before Coffee. It's Thursday, but it feels like it should already be Saturday. So let's get ready with some more news as we find out what's going on in Europe and the world beyond, in the US and Asia, everywhere. We're going to find out what's going on in those places.
Maybe.
So let's go ahead and today on Before Coffee, UK Brexit checks on fresh food from EU delayed for the fifth time, report says.
Waves grew up to 13 feet tall in California as Earth warms, research finds.
Russia systematically forcing Ukrainians to accept citizenship, US report finds.
And Adidas brings in $437 million from selling Yeezy shoes.
Meta to ask EU users permission to show targeted advertising.
Israel protesters are calling for democracy. But what about their occupation of Palestine? Today, on August 3rd, 2023 edition of Before Coffee.
Okay, our first news story today is about Brexit. That's right. Stuff is still going bad for trade between the UK and the EU because of different concerns and red tape. This is from Lisa O'Carroll, the Brussels correspondent. Brexit checks on fresh farm produce coming from the UK from the EU have been delayed for the fifth time, according to reports. The decision to suspend plans to enforce the controls, which have been applied in the other direction to British exports to the EU since January 2021, is due to be announced imminently, according to the Financial Times. The delay is intended to give the government and exporters in the EU more time to prepare for the checks, setting Rishi Sunak on a collision course with domestic UK food producers who have long argued that it gives a free pass to continental rivals when they have to endure checks on all fresh food exports to the bloc. Yes, that is what happens when you leave a trade union. You lose access to trade. According to reports, there are concerns that extra red tape would increase the cost of food imports to consumers and fuel further inflation. The decision comes just days after the government abandoned plans to force manufacturers to label their products with the alternative to the EU's CE, Conformité Européenne safety mark. Industry representatives welcomed the delay. The government has made the right decision to postpone. UK food retailers, hospitality businesses, and consumers were in line for major disruption because many EU food-producing businesses supplying into the UK are not ready for the new requirements, said Shane Brennan, the chief executive of the Cold Chain Federation. He was concerned that the EU producers, some of whom are small producers of specialist products such as cheese, were not even aware of the new requirements that could have led to shortages on the shelves. Another industry source said it was a treasury purge of all changes that would cause disruption to the supply chain, given the sensitivity of the food market to price increase in the current economic climate. Before Brexit, exporters could send chilled and fresh food to the EU without any paperwork because the UK was a member of the single market. Since the UK's departure from the EU, fresh and chilled foods such as sausages or cheese, along with animal and plant products including timber and leather, are subject to sanitary and phytosanitary SPS checks and can only be exported with a health or veterinarian certificate. Exporters from the EU have not had to endure the paperwork after the British government failed to build a new SPS system or secure land for the SPS park to conduct random physical checks. The Brexit cliff edge in 2021 left British exporters of fish and other fresh goods in chaos, with a lack of custom agents and veterinary staff to certify whether produce compiled with EU standards. But in the UK, Brexit checks were pushed back in 2020, on two occasions in 2021, and then again last year by the Brexit Opportunities Minister Jacob Rees-Mogg. In April, the government announced that checks would finally be phased in from October 31st, with further checks implemented in 2023 and 2024. The checks in October were to involve paperwork known as pre-certification. This would alert authorities to the arrival of food products with public health compliance requirements. It is expected that these checks will now be pushed back to the end of January, when the physical SPS checks are due to become operational. Government insiders told the FT that further details of the rules applying to food imports would be published very soon, but the introduction would be pushed back. The driving force behind this is the need to bear down on inflation. That's why there will be a delay. There will be additional cost at the border, the FT said, quoting its sources. So yet again, the Brexit situation has caused more complications and stuff that should be just easy. Right. And we talked about back in May how they built all of these check areas, right? The councils got money loaned to them by the government, and they built these huge garages to check every truck that are refrigerated and up to standard, and they're empty. They're not being used at all because these checks keep on getting pushed further and further and further back, and nobody's doing anything. They're just give us our food. Who cares if there's dangerous mites in them? I don't know. I have no idea what the safety concerns are. But there's safety concerns either way.
Obviously. Yeah, they've had to set up bureaucracy to cover their own asses when they could have just stayed in Brexit and been fine.
Or stayed in the EU even, right?
I mean, it's right, stayed in the EU. My brain is not functioning. Stayed in the EU. Brexit bad. Brexit bad. All right, gotcha. All right. My story, I guess.
Yep.
In news from the hot planet, this is from AP Julie Watson. Waves are getting bigger in the surf. At least 13 feet, 4 meters tall, is becoming more common off California's coast as the planet warms, according to the innovative new research that tracked the increasing height from historical data gathered over the past 90 years. Oceanographer Peter Brommersky at Scripps Institution of Oceanography used the unusual method of analyzing seismic records dating back to 1931 to measure the change in wave height. When waves ricochet off the shore, they collide with the incoming waves and cause a ripple of energy through the seafloor that can be picked up by seismograms designed to detect earthquakes. The greater the impact, the taller the wave is. Until now, scientists relied on a network of buoys, but by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration that collect data on wave height along the U.S. coast. But that data, along with the California coast, only went back until 1980. Until they stumbled upon this data set, it was almost impossible to make that comparison with any kind of reliability, Brommersky said. To go back further, Brommersky gathered a team of undergraduate students to analyze daily seismic readings covering decades of winters. It was a slow, painstaking process that took years and involved digitizing drums of paper records. But he said it was important in learning how things have changed over nearly a century along California's coast. They found that the average winter wave heights have grown by as much as a foot since 1970, when global warming is believed to have begun accelerating. Swells of at least 13 feet tall, about 4 meters, are also happening a lot more often, occurring at least twice as often, between 1996 and 2016, then from 1994 to 1969, which is a similar 20-year period. Okay, Brommersky was also surprised to find extended periods of exceptionally low wave heights prior to about 1970, and none of those periods since. Erosion, coastal flooding, damage to coastal infrastructure is, something that we're seeing more frequently than in the past, Brommersky said. And combined with sea level rise, bigger waves mean that this is going to happen more often. Changes in waves are showing up in other ways too. There are about twice as many big wave events since 1970 as there were prior to 1970, Brommersky said. The study published Tuesday in the National Journal of Geophysical Research, Oceans, adds to the evidence that climate change is causing massive shifts in the world's oceans. Other studies have shown waves are not only getting taller, but also more powerful. Damage from intense storms and massive surfs already playing out. This winter, California Severe storms and giant waves collapsed bluffs, damaged piers, and flooded parts of the state's picturesque Highway 1. Ramersky said that the harbinger of the future, scientists may see global warming more accelerating, ushering even bigger waves. As sea levels rise and storms intensify, bigger walls will cause more flooding in coastal communities, erode away beaches, trigger landslides, and destabilize remaining bluffs. These issues are particularly concerning along California's coast, where sea cliffs have already started crumbling and brought down homes in recent years. Well, don't put your home on a cliff. There's a handy pro tip right there. Because of sea level rise, projections at the end of the 21st century indicate even moderate waves might cause damage comparable to that of extreme weather events, according to the study. Oceanographer Gary Griggs at the University of South California, Santa Cruz said that while a jump in a foot of wave height over more than 50 years is not huge, the findings are consistent with what scientists know is happening to the world's oceans as they warm. They're becoming increasingly violent due to more extreme storms and wreaking havoc along coasts. Griggs, who was not involved in the research, said it adds to the growing scientific data showing how fast the world is warming and how quickly the seas are rising. We know hurricanes are more intense, they last longer, and now we've got, another guy says, waves increasing in power. So these are all consistent. He said the challenge is sort of how to really respond to that. Wait, he has a California way of talking. All right, your story.
Big waves, big cliffs, big danger. Yeah.
Big Sur.
It sucks if you bought a beach property. I don't know why you'd be buying a beach property these days.
Well,
you're
cliff
insane.
Property.
Yeah.
Cliff property.
Cliff property and beach property, you're crazy. Stop that. Stop that. Okay. In more Ukrainian news, we've got Russia is systematically forcing Ukrainians to accept citizenship. This is from Helen Sullivan on The Guardian. Ukrainians living in the Russian-occupied territory are being forced to assume Russian citizenship or face retaliation, including possible deportation or detention, a new U.S. report has said. Yale University researchers found that residents of Luhansk, Donetsk, Kherson, Zaporozhye region were being targeted by systematic efforts to strip them of Ukrainian identity. Ukrainians who do not seek Russian citizenship are subjected to threats, intimidation, and restrictions on humanitarian aid and basic necessities, and possible detention or deportation, all designed to force them to become Russian citizens, the report says. Russia's actions were a classic war crime in the sense that they are restricting or limiting, through this process, people's ability to access critical services and resources that Russia is required to allow all people to access, such as healthcare and humanitarian systems, Nathaniel Raymond, the executive director of Yale School of Public Health, told CNN. Moscow claims to have given Russian passports to more than 3 million Ukrainians since 2014, after the annexation of Crimea and occupation of Ukrainian territories since the launch of its full-scale invasion in 2022. What?
They give them passports.
Yeah.
Okay, what the hell is that for?
They probably take their Ukrainian passports and throw them in the trash. So now they don't have any proof, right? They don't have any physical proof that they were Ukrainians anymore. Right. Other than their birth certificate that says born in Ukraine.
I understand that you get a passport for just being around. In the United States, you gotta go through a whole bunch of crap to get a passport. Go ahead, never mind.
That's like that in all of Europe, actually. I mean, Robert didn't have to do anything to get his, because the EU is how the EU is designed. You don't even need a passport in the EU.
Well,
you can go to 27 countries without ever needing a passport. Yeah.
Right. I'm talking about you want to go someplace that needs a passport.
Yeah.
Relevant to that.
Russian Prime Minister Mikhail Mishustin said in May that Moscow had given passports to almost 1.5 million people living in parts of Ukraine's Donetsk, those regions, since October last year. The number has grown since then, with leaders of the so-called Luhansk People's Republic, the LPR, claiming that 3/4 of the residents of the Oblast region had received Russian citizenship. Russian President Vladimir Putin has signed a series of decrees to compel Ukrainians to get Russian passports in violation of international humanitarian law, the report said. The report included a timeline of increasingly aggressive measures to pressure or force Ukrainians to become Russian citizens, starting in May 2014, when Russia illegally annexed Crimea. The timeline continues ahead to July 2024, when, according to new Russian law, residents without Russian citizenship would be considered foreigners or stateless and can be detained in detention facilities or deported to Russia. Not deported to Ukraine, right? Deported deeper into Russia.
Yeah.
Just deeper and deeper.
Someplace they're not from.
Yeah. I don't know how you deport people to a place they're not from, yeah. March 2014, Russia illegally annexes Crimea and passportation begins. 9 months after annexation, Russia claims that over 1.5 million people in Crimea have received Russian citizenship. February 2022, Russia's full-scale invasion begins, and Moscow captures parts of Kherson and Zaporizhzhia regions. 3 months later, citizenship application in Kherson is as simplified. This follows the simplification of citizenship applications in Donetsk and Luhansk in 2019. In September 2022, Russia illegally annexes those regions from Ukraine. 18th March 2023, Russia introduces a law on unilateral unification of Ukrainian citizenship. This policy allows residents to renounce their Ukrainian citizenship unilaterally. 2 days later, Putin calls for passportation to be accelerated, and local occupation authorities quickly announce new passport offices and mobile teams. Unilateral. 27 April 2023, Russia adopts a law that will allow authorities to detain or deport residents without Russian passports. Starting July 2024, residents without Russian citizenship were considered foreigners and stateless. June 2023, destruction of the Kakhovka Dam, resulting in widespread flooding and displacement. Russia's forces use the aftermath to push citizenship on residents because now they have no food or shelter or homes or healthcare, and they're dying of dysentery. So, well, we would love to help you, but you're not Russian, so sounds like you're gonna die. Totally not under coercion. July 1st, Ukrainian residents who have not accepted Russian citizenship can now be retained or deported, including the remote areas of Russia. The report said, while states are afforded wide discretion under international law with regard for conferring nationality, customary international law clearly forbids the imposition of citizenship without consent or under duress. Yes, and it's indeed under duress. Yes. The report was released as part of the Conflict Observatory Program with the support of the U.S. State Department and conducted by research partner, the Yale School of Public Health Humanitarian Research Lab. So there you go. Ukrainians are not going to exist, not because their country is being conquered, but because they're being forced to become Russian. The classic World War II German strategy of replacing the citizenship of every country with your citizens, and then they can't say that they're Ukrainian anymore because what are you talking about? You're Russian. It says on your passport you're Russian now.
Well, you speak Russian.
Yeah.
You must be
They
Russian.
have a totally different dialect, but yeah.
I'm just saying, they're. This is what despots do.
Your story.
Crazy madmen do. Okay, let me get closer here, as my back is torturing me. All right, and in sneaker news, this is AP story from David McHugh. Frankfurt, Germany. AP. Adidas brought in 400 million euros from the first release of Yeezy sneakers left over after breaking ties with, is it Ye or Ye? The rapper formerly known as Kanye West.
Yeah.
As the German sportswear maker tries to offload the unsold shoes and donate part of the proceeds to groups fighting anti-Semitism and other forms of hate. The first batch of shoes sold in June helped the company reach an operating profit of 176 million euros in the second quarter, better than its originally planned, Adidas said in a statement Thursday. After Kanye West anti-Semitic and other offensive, I'm not going to call him that. After Kanye West anti-Semitic and other offensive comments led to the company to end its partnership with a rapper in October, Adidas has sought a way to dispose of 1.2 billion euros worth of high-end shoes in a responsible way. We will continue to carefully sell off more of the existing Yeezy inventory, said CEO Bjorn Golden, who took over in January. Adidas said it sold out the first batch of Yeezy shoes and launched the second release on Wednesday. This is much better than destroying and writing off the inventory and allows us to make substantial donations to organizations like the Anti-Defamation League, the Philones and Keita Floyd Institute for Social Change, and Robert Kraft Foundation to combat anti-Semitism. Several Jewish civic leaders contacted by the Associated Press said they weren't planning to buy a pair of Yeezys themselves, but generally welcome the plan to support anti-hate organizations, saying the company is trying to make the best of a bad situation. Why are the German companies being so? Isn't that so ironic? The Adidas chief executive added that the Yeezy sales are, of course, helping both our cash flow and general financial strength. The blow-up of the partnership put Adidas in a precarious position because of the popularity of the Yeezy line, and it faced growing pressure to end ties last year as other companies cut off the wrapper. Adidas said now it expects to report an operating loss of 450 million euros this year instead of 700 million euros. Yeezy revenue from June largely in line with sales seen in same April to June period last year. Adidas has not said how many shoes it's selling or whether Yeezy is receiving royalties from the sales. It has only said that we will honor our contractual obligations and enforce our rights, but will not share any more details. Aha, I see. Okay, so that's the story. They're at least using the money and not just putting it in their pockets and going, yeah, nice marketing ploy, boys.
Big sneaker news coming out of freaking the Yeezy manufacturing center.
Coming out of Germany.
Okay,
all right,
wait.
Your story.
My next story. Where did it go? I lost it.
That was a short.
Oh, found it again. Okay. This is news about Meta and user permissions in the EU. Because famously, the EU has much stronger internet safety control regulations for companies, right? You can't just share people's information. You legally aren't allowed to do that. You legally in the EU can actually request businesses to delete all their information from their databases. That's in your rights as an EU person in the EU. So this is from Dan Milmo, the global technology editor at The Guardian. Facebook and Instagram are to ask EU users for permission to show them personalized adverts in a concession that challenges the platform's core money-making strategy. The social media network's parent company, Meta, announced the change after a series of regulatory rulings struck down the company's legal justification for harvesting audience data to create user profiles that can be targeted by advertisers. Meta had argued it had a legitimate interest to process users' data in such a way, but has now conceded that under EU data laws, it must seek consent instead. The company said in a blog post, "We are announcing our intention to change the legal basis that we use to process certain data for behavioral advertising for people in the EU and the EEA, European Economic Area, and Switzerland, from legitimate interest to consent." The UK data watchdog said on Wednesday Meta's announcement was to the exclusion of the UK and would be scrutinized by the regulator. Stephen Almond, Executive Director of Regulatory Risk at the Information Commissioner's Office, said, "As a digital regulator, we pay close attention to how companies operate internationally and how people's rights are respected. We are aware of Meta's plans to seek consent from users for behavioral advertising in the EU, to the exclusion of the UK. We are assessing what this means for information rights of people in the UK and considering an appropriate response." Yet again, another thing the UK has to deal with because it left the EU. I can only slightly enjoy it because, also they didn't want, it was such a close margin. It was 45% didn't want to leave the EU, right? Or was it 46 even? It was even closer, 46. That's so close. Everyone argued that the margin was too close, that they couldn't determine any result from that, and they still did, and now they're suffering for it. Meta's advertising-based business model is already under pressure after Apple's introduced a privacy change that requires app developers to seek user permission to track their online activity to provide them with personalized ads. Advertising accounted for 96% or 97% of Meta's 117 billion revenue last year. Okay, that's a lot. Man, I need to start advertising. Johnny Ryan, a senior fellow at the Irish Council for Civil Liberties and a campaigner for stronger protection of the internet's users' data, said that the move represented a substantial change to Meta's business model. He said that he believed users will not consent to their data being used for targeted ads. I haven't. I did indeed on Instagram get a little notification that said, "Would you like targeted ads?" And I said, "No, I would like 0 ads."
How about that? Yeah.
I understand that's how they pay for their thing, but it's just, I said no, I don't want any targeted ads. Just give me generic ads that have nothing to do with anything I care about, so I can just ignore them. Ryan added, if they do this the way they're obliged in law, no one will ever say yes to the things they are doing. You can say no to some of the toxic elements of Meta's business and still enjoy the service. Indeed, you can. Meta's announcement also asking for users' consent comes after rulings by the Irish Data Protection Commission, which is Meta's EU-wide regulator, as well as EU Court of Justice and the Norwegian Data Protection Authority. So yes, if you don't want to see targeted ads that are like, oh, this is a woman in her 20s, she's probably interested in makeup. I'm actually not interested in makeup, and I don't want to see those. Just give me random ads for mops or something. Or car insurance.
They're more likely to give you a target spam from Russia.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Meta's secret Russia propaganda scheme.
Exactly.
Okay.
Click on this link, your favorite actor died, and you find out it's hacked your computer, and it's over.
Your next story.
Oh, okay. Just drinking my mega tears.
My maggot.
They're
How long have you had that cup?
flowing. Oh, a little while. I just break out for special occasions, and it's a special occasion. It's flowing today, and I've had to drink, because the reservoir is getting full.
Yeah.
Anyway, all right. In Israel news, this is from AP also, or all AP today. This is from Tia Goldenberg. Jerusalem, Israel is being rocked by a wave of mass protests calling for the country's democracy to be upheld. But the pro-democracy movement lacks any clear message of opposition to Israel's open-ended military rule over millions of Palestinians. That's right, we want democracy for us, but then Palestinians, forget that. The contradiction reflects a widely held belief among Jewish Israelis that the conflict with the Palestinians is both intractable and somehow separate from Israel's internal strife. Critics of the protest movement, including Palestinians, said this is a significant blind spot and that such selective advocacy of democratic ideals show how disconnected Israelis are from the harsh reality of those living under Israel's occupation. It ain't like they're 7 million miles away either.
Yeah, the right.
It's so
next
ironic.
door.
Yeah, it's so ironic that we're talking and protesting for democracy, while at the same time it's been dictatorship for Palestinians for 75 years, said Diana Boutou, a Palestinian commentator. They're afraid that their own privileges and rights are going to somehow be affected, but they won't make the connection with the occupation. The protesters are demonstrating against the drive of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's government to weaken the judiciary by limiting judicial oversight on official decision-making and legislation. The protest movement says its limited message against the judicial overhaul is holding together one of the largest and most sustained protest movement Israel has ever seen, bringing tens of thousands of people to the streets in the last 30 weeks. But do you have any leaders that will actually take charge? Netanyahu's government, made up of ultra-nationalists and ultra-religious parties with close ties to the West Bank settler movement, says the overhaul will restore power to elected lawmakers and rein in what it says is an overly interventionist judicial system. Critics see the legislative push, especially because it's driven by far-right and conservative religious parties, as an assault on Israel's democratic fundamentals and its weak system of checks and balances. They say it will open the door to serious infringements on personal liberties and the rights of women, the LGBTQ community, and minorities that will set Israel on a path toward autocracy. The Protesters came from a wide swath of Israel's societies. They chant democracy or rebellion, carry signs reading Israel will remain a democracy, and have unfurled a giant copy of your country's Declaration of Independence, which serves as an unofficial Bill of Rights at various events. But largely missing from the raucous protests is any meaningful reference to Israel's 56-year occupation of lands in Palestine's seek for their future state. A small contingent of activists waving Palestinian flags have taken part, but remain mostly on the fringe. In some cases, they have been ostracized by organizers who feared that mentioning the occupation would somehow undercut the protest movement. Israel's Palestinian citizens, who make up a fifth of the population, have sat out the protests in part because demonstrations are ignoring the occupation. The protest is against the reduction of the democratic space for Jews. Most Jews in Israel don't have a problem with Israel enforcing the apartheid regime in the West Bank, said Dror Etkis, a veteran anti-occupation activist. Despite his concerns, Etkis has made a point of participating in the protests. He sees the absence of occupation related to the themes in the strategy meant to unite disparate groups against a more imminent threat. He said that if the government has its way, people like me won't be able to protest at all. The Associated Press contacted several protest leaders who either declined comment or did not respond to questions about the contradictions. Israel captured the West Bank and East Jerusalem and Gaza Strip territories. The Palestinians seek for their hoped-for independent state in the 1967 Mideast War. Israel withdrew from the Gaza Strip in 2005 along with Egypt and forces a blockade on the territory. More than 700,000 settlers now live in the West Bank and East Jerusalem. Palestinians on the West Bank live under limited autonomous self-rule, but Israel controls major parts of their lives, including movement and travel, construction permits in certain areas, and significant parts of the economy. Israel's military also frequently targets Palestinian areas, and what it says is a bid to thwart militancy. A two-tier legal system is also in place in the West Bank, with large parts of Israeli law apply to Jewish settlers, and Palestinians are subject to Israeli military law. Palestinians cannot vote in Israeli elections. Their own leadership, established as part of the interim peace agreements in the 1990s, has repeatedly delayed Palestinian elections. While Palestinians in East Jerusalem hold Israel residency and have access to certain social benefits, they face widespread discrimination. They can apply for citizenship, but many choose to not to, either on ideological grounds or because the process is too bureaucratic. These contrasting realities have prompted rights groups to say an apartheid system has taken root, which it has. And again, this goes on. Let's see. The protests have also coincided with a spike of in Israel-Palestinian fighting, during which radical settlers have attacked Palestinian towns, most notably Hawaras, setting cars and homes ablaze with paltry response from Israel's security forces. The prominent protest chant, "Where were you in Harawa?" emerged as a cry against perceived police brutality against protesters. Anver Gvaryaru, who heads Breaking the Silence, a whistleblower group of former soldiers, is a constant presence at the protests. He has watched the frustration as military reservists have refused to continue serving to protest what they say is a disintegration of Israel's democracy, but kept silent over the occupation. Still, the reservist protest has shattered a taboo against military refusal, a tool he said might be used in the future by soldiers against the occupation. The mainstream is waking up, he said. Palestinians remain skeptical. Shawan Jabarian, head of the Palestinian rights group Al-Haq, said he considers the protests an internal Israeli struggle to maintain status quo that has only cemented the occupation. "What democracy are you speaking about?" he said. "Democracy doesn't go in the same time with occupation." So, here they are, Israel, basically doing what Nazi Germany did. and Russia did.
South Africa.
Right? Separate the Jews into the ghettos and control them. Basically the thing they escaped.
Honestly, what's even worse...
It's so ironic.
Yeah, it is very ironic. I don't know if you've seen it before, but I saw a video it happens all the time, but I saw a video recently there's this thing settlers do, is what Palestinians call Israelis. Settlers. Where
right.
they just move into
Land
town.
stealers
They move into town, they wait for you to go to work or, go out to get some milk, and then they literally move into your house while you're away. And they say, this is my house now.
The Europeans that took over North America were called pioneers. The Indians called them, hey, you assholes are stealing our land.
Well, in less serious news, we've got more news on the writers and actors strike, in which George Clooney, Meryl Streep, Matt Damon, among other A-listers, are donating $1 million to help striking actors. This follows after Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson helped raise $15 million to help those who are hit the hardest. This is from Catherine Shord on The Guardian. More than a dozen top-tier film stars have followed the lead of Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson in donating more than $1 million to SAG-AFTRA's Emergency Hardship Fund. As announced by Foundation President Courtney B. Vance on Wednesday, $15 million has been raised so far to help those hit hardest by the cessation of filming in Hollywood. This is in large part thanks to the contributions of George and Amal Clooney, Luciana and Matt Damon, Leonardo DiCaprio, Hugh Jackman, and Deborah Lee Furness, Nicole Kidman, Jennifer Lopez, Ben Affleck, Ryan Reynolds, and Blake Lively, Julia Roberts, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Meryl Streep, and Oprah Winfrey. The entertainment industry is in crisis, and the SAG-AFTRA Foundation is currently processing more than 30 times more our unusual number of applications for emergency aid, said Vance. We received 400 applications in the last week alone. It's a massive challenge, but we're determined to meet this moment. Vance describes Johnson's 7-figure donation last week as a call to arms for everyone to step up however you can. It's really weird to call him Johnson. Johnson's The Rock is his name. No matter, even after he dies, he's going to be called The Rock. On Wednesday, Vance credited Johnson with helping kickstart this campaign, leading to a response he called incredible, immediate, and heartwarming. He singled out Clooney and Streep, both vocal campaigners for the foundation and members of its Actors Council, who stepped up with 1 million donations, emails, and many call to action rallies, others to give generously. 1 million seems like a little amount, but I don't know how much these guys, I guess they're not making anything because they're also on strikes. They're not making any money either.
Big royalties.
But I assume most A-listers aren't making money from roles. I think they're mostly making money. Yeah.
They make royalties don't stop anyone on strike. Go ahead, sorry.
Yeah. Both actors also shared statements urging peers to help chip in to the fund as the actors strike looks to enter its second month. I remember my days as a waiter, cleaner, typist, and even my time on the unemployment line, wrote Streep. In these strike actions, I'm having speaking trouble today. In this strike action, I am lucky to be able to support those who will struggle in a long action to sustain against Goliath. We will stand strong together against these powerful corporations who are bent on taking the humanity, the human dignity, and even the human out of our profession. I am proudest of my fellow actors who have immediately offered to fund the Emergency Financial Assistance Program. Clooney said that the union was ready to re-enter renegotiations, but until then, I'm proud to be able to support the SAG-AFTRA Foundation and my fellow actors who may be struggling in this historic moment. We've stood on the shoulders of the likes of Bette Davis and Jimmy Cagney, and it's time for our generation to give something back. While actors such as Susan Sarandon, Paul Dano, Olivia Wilde, and Bob Odenkirk have been seen, the picket line has been lacking in star power. Where the fuck is Ben Affleck? Read one placard on the first weekend of the strike.
Really?
Another bore the message, you poor Montana ranch. I'm trying to pay my rent, not my third and fourth mortgage, and fuel my private jet. Some have hazarded that the multi-million-dollar pay packets taken home by top stars are helping fuel the same industry imbalance strikers are protesting against. Former Fox and Paramount boss Barry Diller suggested such inequality might be addressed by studio heads and A-listers alike, agreeing to a 25% pay cut. Although his suggestion has been warmly embraced by many, it has been met with silence by those he proposes to take the hit. Yeah, Hey, A-listers, are you okay with losing 25% of what you make right now so that other actors who are background actors can make more money and live? I don't know.
No, they're not going to give up anything. They'll give to the strike fund.
Yeah, but I don't want to take a pay cut. What the hell?
Oh, no. Who's taking a pay cut? Nobody.
Nobody wants a pay cut, even though they're making $10 million a year. 25% of $10 million is nothing, but, you know.
Well, as movies are not exactly becoming great these days.
Well, anyways, on to this day in history.
All right, this day in history. We go back to 1583. English navigator Sir John. Sir John. Where did I see John? Okay, here we go. English navigator Sir Humphrey Gilbert arrived at St. John's, Newfoundland, and claimed it in the name of the Queen. I didn't know the Queen was named St. John. In 1778, the opera house La Scala opened in Milan with the performance of Antonio Salieri's Europa Riconosciuta. I can't pronounce it. 1900, American journalist Ernie Pyle was born. He was one of the most famous correspondents of World War II. 1914, Germany declared war on France in World War I. In 1921, a day after being acquitted on insufficient evidence, largely because of key evidence had disappeared from the grand jury files, 8 Chicago White Sox players were banned from playing baseball for life, accused of receiving bribes to intentionally lose the 1919 World Series, including shoeless Joe Jackson. 1924, English novelist and short story author Joseph Conrad, who was admired for the richness of his prose and his renderings of dangerous life at sea and exotic places, died in Canterbury, Kent. In 1936, at the Olympics in Berlin, American track athlete Jesse Owens won the 100-meter event, the first of his 4 Olympic gold medals. In 1940, Lithuania was accepted into the USSR following the Soviet occupation. Accepted into the USSR. Following the Soviet occupation of Baltic states. It's like, we're accepting you as a Russian citizen, even though you live in Ukraine.
Yeah, right.
Same thing. All right. In 1941, Martha Stewart was born, who her real name is not Martha Stewart. I should get you her real name, because she's claiming to be a Stewart and she's not. That kind of cheeses me off, you know? 1949, the National Basketball Association was formed, and merged in the National Basketball League and the Basketball Association of America. Martha Stewart is 82? Really? Okay. The U.S. atomic submarine Nautilus passed beneath a thick ice cap on the North Pole, an unprecedented feat on this day in 1958. In 1960, the Republic of Niger gained its independence from France and are currently under a military coup, so we'll see how long that lasts. 1984, American gymnast Mary Lou Retton won the all-around event at the Los Angeles Games, becoming the first American woman to win the individual Olympic gold medal in gymnastics. In 1992, American revisionist Western Unforgiven had its world premiere and later won 4 Academy Awards, including the Best Director for Clint Eastwood, who also starred in the drama. Now, in 2004, French photographer Henri Cartier-Bresson, who was the master of street photography, capturing what he called the decisive moment, died at the age of 95. And the featured event, 1492, Columbus gets on his ship for his first transatlantic voyage. Hoping to find a westward route to India, Christopher Columbus on this day in 1492 set sail from the first transatlantic voyage, departing from Palos, Spain with 3 small ships, the Nina, Pinta, and Santa Maria. And famous birthdays. Stanley Baldwin, first Earl Baldwin of Gildee, and Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, was born on this day in 1867. Tom Brady, American football player, was born this day in 1977. We already covered Martha Stewart. Jonas Savimbi, Angolan politician, was born in 34. And Tony Bennett, who just died last week, was born in this day in 1926.
Oh man, he missed
In
his
1870
birthday.
And he missed his birthday about 10 days. In 1872, Hakon the Seventh, the King of Norway, was born. And what day is it? You can't wait to know that it's Watermelon Day. National Watermelon Day. Hell yeah. I'm getting me a watermelon. I drive past so many fruit stands and I'm like, man, I gotta get me a watermelon. But you gotta eat that sucker, man. You can't just leave it sitting around. National Grab Some Nuts Day.
No way.
It's also the happy birthday of these nuts, I believe. National Georgia Day, which goes with Grab Some Nuts Day because peanuts in Georgia. Yeah, I don't know. National Hair Gloss Day. It's National Hair Gloss Day. And National IPA Day is the first Thursday in August. IPA is like a homemade beer, basically.
Yeah,
Really
go find your
thick.
local IPA and
High alcohol
watermelon.
content. Knock you on your ass. Alcohol content. Yeah. And that's it for the days of today. And grab some nuts.
All right, well, that's been Allison here from the Netherlands, excited about eating a giant watermelon. And I will see you on Friday as we end this week with some more news.
And this is Roger in the United States with comprehensive news of planet Earth. And reminding everybody just to grab some nuts, not all of them. This is the August 3rd, 2023 edition of Before Coffee. Be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and notify buttons. And follow our other channels, Toxic Alley, History of Gravy, and Scratchy Old Records.